All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Leslie Brill, president of Bronx River Sound Shore Audubon Society, and welcome to our speaker program with Dr. Walter Jahn talking about the evolution of birds. Very glad to see you all here, and we are honored to have him as our speaker tonight. Just by way of introduction, I'll read his bio. He received his doctorate in biology from Temple University and a master's in education from Widener University. He's taught a diversity of biology courses at Orange County Community College over 27 years. In addition to his teaching, he has served as a Peace Corps volunteer, Boy Scout and Girl Scout leader, board member for the Orange County Audubon Society and Bashakill Area Association, and a sanctuary steward for the Audubon Sanctuary at 6.5 Station. Am I
Yep.
pronouncing that? 6.5 Station near Goshen, New York. Very impressive. So without further ado, if you're ready to share your screen, Walter, we're
Let me see. Let's
started.
share and yeah, Leslie, I'll get to what you had asked. I'm sorry, there's one more. Go away. All right. So you wanted me to start here. So can you see my screen, Leslie?
Yes, thank you. There's some areas that are blacked out, but
Okay, so it's being
oh,
recorded.
there it goes. There's one is gone.
I can minimize the okay, yeah.
Oh, that's better. If you can remove that bar at the bottom, that would be great. But if not, no worries. Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Are we good?
We're good.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you this evening. I'd like to thank Leslie for this opportunity. And I'd like to say hi to the Bronx River Sound Shore Audubon Society. I am a board member of the Orange County Audubon Society, and I help to manage one of our sanctuaries, and I put out a newsletter, and all of this. And I teach a number of classes, some on birds, some on prehistoric life. This is exciting for me. The biggest problem I'm going to have tonight is just so that you know where I'm coming from. Uh, I would love to talk about the evolution of birds for 3 hours. I would love to talk about the anatomy of birds in a comparative anatomy. I'm just going to hit admit if Leslie, if I see an admit person into the talk come up. Um, I'd love to talk about the comparative anatomy for quite some time. And over the fall, I gave a series of 15 presentations on birds, going through all of the different groups. So there's just so much wonderful, exciting stuff, far more than we have time for. So if it seems like I'm trying, ooh, you should hear this fact. No, there's not enough time. It's that constant debate here. In fact, if anyone cares, I have a YouTube channel. I'll give you its address. That's where the videos you'll be watching will come from. It's Dr. Jahn 41, DRJAHN 41. So if you type in Dr. Jahn 41, YouTube, you go here. And in addition to all of these other things, we have songs. You may hear one at the end, but here's like a sample of one or two just so you like birds. So here's a Great Blue Heron song. Shadows lengthen at twilight, sunfish best stay out of sight, great blue herons go hunting at night. So there is so much more. There's a song or two that might relate to tonight's topic that maybe we fit in by the end. But I'd like to start if there's no other to do. And so what I'll be doing is I'll just kind of be clicking on my videos one at a time, watching parts of them. And if anyone says, ooh, that looks interesting, and he cut it kind of short, remember, you're welcome to go to my YouTube channel and, view as many as you'd like. So because I'm a teacher, I apologize. I know you didn't sign up for this, but I'm gonna start off with a quiz if that's okay. So you can either turn on your mics and give your answer, or you could, put something in the chat. Question number one, is this a bird?
Yes.
All right, good, good. Someone studied. All right, is this a bird?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, you guys are doing great. How about this one? And this one, all right, so you guys, you seem to be doing great. You seem to be able to recognize birds. So my next question is, how? How'd you get it right? How did you know that they were birds? Anyone?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. This is on our board. I should know this.
Okay. All right. So tell you what, I'm not quite sure if it's a sound or if you're shy. Feel free to. Oh, there's the chat. I'd be happy to go on what I think. Okay, they have wings. All right. Oh, anything with feathers. So okay. So there's feathers. They have wings. And if we were to keep on going, maybe they have a toothless beak. They have a specific bones, etc. So let's just go with I saw feathers and wings. And you're good. Yes, you could identify something correctly as a bird from your list. If you don't mind, because I teach anatomy, let me just kind of go through a few other things which make birds special, because believe it or not, this ties in then to the dinosaurs and the very gradual evolution of birds. So yes, they have feathers. Now, what do I mean by feathers? Well, I mean different things by feathers, because there's different kinds. I see a chat, so let me just quick check. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. See, you're already jumping to part of the punchline. So yes, good. Yes, very wise. We'll be getting to that. Um, so there are different kinds of feathers. So this would be a downy feather. There are the contour feathers, which include flight feathers. So there's different kinds of feathers. That becomes very important. Here's a contour feather. A term that I will use in a second is not only are these veined contour feathers, but they're asymmetrical. What do I mean by that? If you look at, here's the vein, all right, the middle of it, but notice that it's fatter on one side than the other. And that shows that this bird flies with these feathers. If it wasn't flying, you would see the same amount of space on either side of this vein, but it's asymmetrical. That's an adaptation for flight. So on either side of the rachis, um, in a vein, in an asymmetrical feather, you would see this would be small, this would be big. That becomes an important question, whether dinosaurs had that. So they have wings, all right? In their arm bones, we see bones, but unlike my bones, a lot of them are fused. So their carpal bones and their metacarpal bones are fused to form a carpometacarpus. So even though that's one structure, it's actually a whole bunch of little bones which smush together. This, somewhere here, go. We'll get to the legs. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of examples of fused bones. So if you were to look at the skull, for example, and say, where are the individual bones? You don't see it. You just see like a big skull because they all smush together. Notice the toothless beak. Notice there's holes in specific places, like that hole. That's a very specific hole, etc. There are holes in vertebrae for extensions of their lungs. There are modified ribs that have these little processes coming out. They have, those are the same ribs. They have all of these anatomical features. On their feet, most of them have 3 toes pointing forward, 1 toe pointing back. They have a hole in their hip. So I could go on and on. There's the hole in their hip. Here's this very long ischium bone pointing backwards and a very long pubic bone here. So in addition to your list of, forgive me, I'm just going to give a quick instruction to my daughter who just came home. Please have to give him my talk. So that's okay. So if we were to say what makes a bird, it's a long list. I love talking about bird anatomy, and I'd happy to make this a 3-hour discussion as we go into their urinary systems and their hearts, etc. But just suffice it to say, you said that there were feathers and wings, and I would love to add all of these other features. All of these things make a bird a bird. But if you were to go, and I'm just going to jump around here. If you were to go to the Jurassic period and look up in the sky, you would see feathered things. And not one of, all right, I just lied to you. One and maybe 1.5 of the terms I just used could help you identify a bird. So in other words, while that list of things that you just saw, if you ask, is that a bird? All of these things could help you identify it's a bird. They have the wishbone or a furcula. They have the long hand. They have all of these features. But it turns out that so did a lot of their dinosaur ancestors have some of those features. Or the first birds didn't have them. Modern birds do, the first birds do. So while you say, aha, it has feathers, it's a bird, that wouldn't help you if you were living in the past. You could say, oh, it has wings, that's a bird. That wouldn't help you if you were living in the past. So I'd like to then go into the past and look at these ancestral groups of birds. And because I love birds, and being an Audubon Society, I'm sure you love birds as well, let's study how the bird body plan came to be. So if we were to put birds into um, a family trait. We could start long before the dinosaurs. We could say, oh, they belong to this group. They belong to this group. They are tetrapods. They are amniotes. They are diapsids, etc. So there's a family tree of living things, just like you are mammals. And within the mammals, there are the live-bearing mammals. And within the live-bearing mammals, there are the primates. And within the primates, there are the apes, etc. We could do the same thing with birds and put them into this nested hierarchy of groups. And as we get into the dinosaurs, all right, so here's dinosaurs and then the meat-eating theropod dinosaurs. Let me just get to a place where there's some text. If you found a bunch of bones and you said, aha, I want to identify if this is a dinosaur. Is this a dinosaur? Well, it's not just, you just can't look at the bones and say, yeah, I'll call it a dinosaur. No, there are rules in science. You say it's a dinosaur if it has these traits. So if you could say, it's, if it has these traits, we would not only put it in the dinosaur group, we would make it a neotheropod. If it had, there's a couple more neotheropod traits. If it had these traits, we would call it a tetanoran. So if you were identifying dinosaurs and groups of dinosaurs, there are rules that you can't call it a tetanoran unless it has these features. You can't call it a maniraptoran if it has the next features. But the thing is, birds, at least the first birds, have these features too. So if you say, all right, how do I classify a dinosaur? There's these features. All right, there's a hole in the hip. And you say, ooh, dinosaurs have that. Ooh, but so do birds. All right, and they have this special ankle joint, which I'll get to in a second. Oh, so do birds. All right, and not only are birds then dinosaurs because they have the features, it's the rule, they meet the characteristics, then they belong to this group, the neotheropods, because they have the traits. They're tetanorans because they have the traits. And once again, my problem is going to be, how do I fit in the hours and hours that I would love to share with you into this. So I won't go through each group. But if we were to say in every group of the family tree, so here the pink, they're in the neotheropods. Here in the salmon color, that's tetanorans, avetheropods, the coelurosaurs, etc. As we get up to the very end of the family tree, there's a bird there. But along each of these groups, there are rules. You don't belong to this pink group unless you have these features. But it turns out birds have those features. So by that, we would say, oh, okay, well, birds, they belong to these, all of these groups. Now, some of the features are more important than others in our head. So let's just jump to those. Feathers, okay? Birds are not the only animals which have had feathers. And if we look back, just a quick reminder, it's easy to say, aha, yes, feathers, the things birds use to fly. Yes, they use to fly here, as you can see on this hawk's wing, but they do more than that. All right, look, this is camouflage. All right, so that's one of the roles of feathers. White and black feathers can absorb light or reflect light. If you're on a pond and you've got a dozen species there and it's mating season and you're asking the question, who do I have sex with? All right, there's like a dozen wrong answers. All right, because if you mate with this other species, your offspring won't survive. So you could look at feathers, and the females can say, "Aha, this is one of my males because it has these things." You can use your feathers to impress the females, or say, "Ooh, look how red I am! I'm eating lots of red berries. I'm a well nourished male. You should mate with me rather than the ones that don't look as healthy." So as we start talking about dinosaur feathers, remember that feathers do a lot more than fly. And so when we look at this dinosaur, we say, look at that. We can see traces of just fluffy stuff along its vertebral column and other places. Here, look, there's just fluffy, sticky outy stuff, here, and there's just lots and lots of them. All right, so look, all along the back, we can see feathers. And you might then ask the question, well, can this thing fly? And the answer is no, those aren't flight feathers. But remember that feathers do so many other things. They can help keep you warm, etc. So not only do we have imprints in rocks, but actually there are fossils from Canada which have preserved in amber what seem to be dinosaur feathers. They are not bird feathers because the barbules would interlock. That's not a feather in a sense that a modern bird would have that. And I'd be happy to, once again, this is the abbreviated version. I'd be happy to go back to the other feathers and show how they all have the interlocking barbules. But that's not a reptile scale either. That's something in the middle. So, as we go through all of the traits that birds have, avian biology evolves in a series of steps, and feathers did as well. But that makes sense because we know that feathers can serve to keep warm. They can help, males show off to females. They can help identify what species you're in. They can help camouflage so that nothing eats you, etc. And so, if we were to look at a lot of these dinosaurs, all right, we'd say, oh, you've got feathers, but there's reasons for that. A lot of these couldn't fly. In fact, for example, Caudipteryx in the song, it has gizzard stones. A lot of animals still do that, even some birds, where they swallow stones, and in their gizzard, they use the stones to grind up their food because they no longer have molars that their teeth can do that. So Caudipteryx couldn't fly, but it had feathers. Now, not only did it have feathers, it then also has flight feathers. So there's different kinds of feathers. Some are just downy feathers for keeping warm, and that goes way back in the family tree. But a little higher in the family tree, you get these things. Those are flight feathers. Now, could this animal fly? No. So why do you have flight feathers if you can't fly? Well, I don't know. And the song pursues some things. Once again, maybe this would be good in courtship. Maybe this could maybe help you catch your prey if you had like a little basket that you could make with your arms and scoop things up. All right, so feathers and even then flight feathers are known in dinosaurs. So earlier, the first question I asked, is this a bird? If you said it's a bird because it has feathers, it turns out that's not a diagnostic feature. There were things that had feathers that were not birds. All right. Now, this dinosaur, Caudipteryx, had flight feathers, but it could not fly. Once again, each of these could be its own separate lecture. And as we go through each of the groups, as I said, we could say, ooh, here's another bird feature that dinosaurs have. So, for example, brooding over a nest. All right, we associate that with birds. We have a couple of dinosaurs preserved in the act. A wishbone, as you may remember from Thanksgiving, it's a pair of fused clavicles that you're pulling apart. Well, it turns out dinosaurs had that. Dinosaurs could have flight feathers on their arms and tail. Let me just go to a better one. All right, so here you can see some of those flight feathers. Those are not just downy feathers. Those are the fluffy flight feathers here. So we actually have preserved feathers in some case. And in other cases, like Velociraptor that you might know from Jurassic Park, do we have feathers? No. However, see that dimple and that dimple and that dimple and that dimple on the arm of a modern bird. You would have these dimples where the flight feathers attach. The collagen attaches the flight feather to the bone. So even though we don't have feathers preserved with the bone suggests that feathers were there. In some cases, we actually know what the color the feathers were. Anchiornis was black and white, all right, and it had a little bit of a reddish brown rufous cap to it. Some of the feathers had different structures. So this one had feathers that looked like really long scales. They didn't branch out as much. And that's interesting because that might be the kind of the state from which feathers started, really long scales. Now, could these things fly? Well, for most of the time, the answer is no. They're not built right. They're too heavy. But as we go through this family tree and get higher and higher, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but their arms are getting longer relative to their body. So we're now getting close. All right, so there's a ratio of if your arms are this long to a thin, narrow body that you would actually then be capable of like gliding or flight. So enter this thing. All right, this thing, there's a couple of different species. One of them you could have held in your hand. Well, the tail would have been long and like hung outside your hand, but nevertheless, it's small. And it had feathers on its arms and legs and tail. Now, the leg thing, I know a lot of you might just kind of dismiss and like, oh, that's weird. But interestingly, the first birds, Archaeopteryx, actually had flight feathers on its legs as well. So that's kind of interesting. But the question is, if you're a small little thing that has flight feathers on its arms, legs, and tail, could you fly? Eh, most people would say probably not. Could you glide? Well, I mean, come on. I mean, there are snakes that glide because they flatten their body. There are frogs that can jump and glide because they have webbing between their toes. There are squirrels and marsupials that can glide because they have a patch of skin between their arms and their legs. If those things, there are fish that can glide because they've got big pectoral fins. If those things could glide, then certainly this thing could. All right. So some of these dinosaurs, as we near the top of the family tree, were certainly capable of gliding. Now, at what point, here's a philosophical question. If anyone wants to get into philosophy, by all means, we can do this. We don't have to. Where is the cutoff between gliding well and flying poorly? That's too deep for me. I don't know the answer to that. However, Rahona was first classified as a bird that looked like a dinosaur. We now think it's a dinosaur that looked like a bird. But its body proportions are right for at least weak flight. Bambiraptor, pretty long arms. Maybe we're getting close to flight. Once again, Microraptor, all right, it's got a light skeleton. So birds evolved the ability to fly, but it's possible that some of their dinosaur cousins got to gliding or maybe even weak flight. Now, I would love to really get into avian anatomy, but I'm just going to mention a couple of things. It's probably not what we really want to do here. So here's the very quick synopsis before I get to the I'd like to talk about the first birds after the dinosaurs. I don't want this just to be all about dinosaurs because we got fossil birds we want to talk about too. So, what makes let's just look at bird anatomy real quick so we can compare it to dinosaurs. Birds have three bones in their shoulder. They have a thin strap-like shoulder blade, the scapula. They have a procoracoid and they have a clavicle, which two clavicles fuse and that makes the wishbone, the furcule. All right. So dinosaurs had those. And even here's an alligator. The scapula doesn't look like yours. It kind of looks like a thin strap. But you get to Tyrannosaurus Rex. Look at that thin strap. That looks like a bird's scapula. It's positioned the same way. That looks like the procoracoid. The clavicles can be there. And so the shoulder of dinosaurs, especially once we start getting into the velociraptor cousins, who could probably even hold their arms the way that birds hold their wings. The pectoral girdle, the shoulder, was getting similar to the bones of birds by the time we get through the dinosaur groups. Now, if you've had wings, all right, or the next time you have a wings at an Bronx River Audubon Society party, you might say, "Ooh, what bones, am I, eating in this wing?" You could identify them in the same as you have a humerus, a radius, and ulna. You've got some wrist bones there, so there are, the traditional vertebrate bones here in the wings. All right, and the dinosaurs had these same wings. They were a little more separate in the early birds. So if you were to say, all right, here we go. If you were to say, all right, the earliest birds, which I'll be getting to in a second, they had more clawed fingers. So just as I have a humerus, a radius, and ulna, carpal bones, metacarpals, and then the phalanges here, all right, the first birds would look a bit more like dinosaur hands, which would then get modified over time to form the wings of modern birds. I'd love to talk about the muscles. What muscles do birds use to fly? Well, the pectoralis muscles, the chest muscle, the way that I have here. There's a really neat muscle underneath that I'll get back to in a second. We'll get to that. All right, so there's another neat muscle here. But they've got a deltoid, they have a biceps brachii, a triceps brachii, they have a latissimus. So the same muscles that you and I have, all right, dinosaurs had and birds have. The thing that made birds special was not that they got like new fancy muscles, but they did fancy things with the muscles that they already had. So here's a hole that I would like to spend a moment on. See that, the hole? So where the shoulder blade, the clavicle, and the procoracoid touch, they touch and they make a hole. All right, so this is a modern bird. Who cares? Well, because of that hole, there is this muscle called the supracoracoideus. All right, that's actually kind of like one of your rotator cuff muscles if we wanted to get there. Now, here it is here, but it's under the wing, but because of that hole, it goes up and over the wing, but its tendon goes through there. So it turns out that one of the things that gives bird flight a really cool trick to it that I'll be getting to in maybe 10 minutes is a repositioning of the muscles that dinosaurs had, and heck, you even have them. All right. So as we look at dinosaurs, they were getting more and more like birds, and they have all of the components. I told you about the weird bones in a hip here. All right, so here's an emu's hip, and it's got this really long ischium, this really long pubis. But if you were to look at dinosaurs like T-Rex, all right, you'd see the same bones. Look, there's a really long ischium, a really long pubis. It would be in the velociraptor group that this would start pointing backwards, just like in the birds. If we were to look at the legs, they're the same bones. If you were to say T-Rex, show me all your leg bones. And we'd go through, here's the femur, the tibia, the fibula. The ankle joint is really weird with a really weird bone. Then you look at a bird, like, they're the same. All right, so we see all of the pieces that you need to make bird anatomy already in the dinosaurs. Even things like holes in bones for air sacs and lungs. So birds are really special in how they breathe. They breathe so much more efficiently than you do because they have holes in their bones for air sacs. All right, so that their gas exchange can actually go inside their bones. All right, so here's a bird bones, and here you see those pneumatic bones. So that when birds breathe in, see all these colors? Those are air sacs in addition to the lungs. The lungs are in blue. We have these air sacs. Well, it turns out dinosaurs had them. All right, so these air sacs, which allow birds to breathe better for flight, dinosaurs had them. Let me do one more video, then we kind of go back here. This is the hand of a dinosaur. that is the wing of a bird. And if we color in the bones, you see they have all the same bones. So for tens of millions of years, meat-eating dinosaurs went through all of these branches of their family tree. And as we get close, higher up on the family tree, we're finding more and more traits which we associate with birds. But it turns out they're not bird features. They were features of the meat-eating dinosaur group at various stages. And they would help make modern birds birds, but they evolved in bird ancestors. So what makes a bird a bird? If you were to say, this is where I draw the line. On this side of the line, there's a dinosaur. On the other side of the line, there's a bird. The answer is the experts are going to argue with you on this one. It's not as clear cut as you'd think. And in general, there are two things that you could say, and neither of these are great, but nevertheless, these are the two answers I have, and I'm going to stick with them. One is this hand is the arm and hand are longer in proportion to the rest of their body. Now, this is hard to do because, the Deinonychus and Velociraptor group, their hands were longer than the previous group, which were longer than the previous group. So these dinosaur hands had been getting longer and longer and longer, but you get to who we call birds, they're a little bit longer still. So we kind of arbitrarily say, here's the line, longer than this, and this could be a wing. Also, we could get to a perching foot. Now, I'm sure you Audubon people know, not all birds have three toes pointing forward. The owls don't, the woodpeckers don't, usually don't, etc. But if you look at the first birds, we have more of a situation where three toes are going forward, but the other one has turned so that it faces the other three so that it can perch on a branch. Dinosaurs do have a small first toe that's starting to turn a little, but no dinosaur has a perching foot where that one actually is pointing forwards. So at a certain point in this family tree, we would say, Microraptor, or you, whoever, you're a dinosaur because your arms are just a little too short and you don't yet have a perching foot and maybe a couple of other really thing, or your feathers, they're veined, but they're not asymmetrical, showing that you haven't been flying, with them. So these smaller features, and then you get to the other side of that line and we say, aha, look at you. Your arms are long enough to be wings. You have a perching foot. You have asymmetrical feathers. You, my friend, you are a bird. So I'd love to talk about the first birds, but before I do, just over tens of millions of years, we could talk about that at this point in the family tree, we have flight feathers. But you go a little further back, they didn't have flight feathers, but they had the fluffy feathers. And you go back a little farther, that's where they had the wishbones or the brooding over the nest, etc. So you could trace how the complexities of the bird anatomy that they use for flight actually evolved over tens of millions of years. And that's exciting. But there's more exciting stuff, so let's jump to that. Let's look at the first birds. Well, they're weird. They're certainly not the birds of today. So let's take Archaeopteryx, the best studied because we have so many complete fossils of them. It's a bird by the standards which we just set. All right. It was certainly capable of flight, not good flight. All right. So that's something I'll be focusing on for the next 5 minutes or so. There's a difference between flying and flying as well as modern birds do. This thing could fly, but it could not fly anywhere near as well as modern birds do. One quick example. Birds fly, and I should be impressed by that. And to be honest, I'm not as impressed by that as you think I should be. That's because if you look at my chest, look at my sternum, my breastbone, it's flat. And I have chest muscles, but they can only get so big because they're attached to a bone which is flat. Modern birds, most of them, have what's called a keeled sternum. Their sternum comes out to here. If I had a keeled sternum that came out to here and my chest muscles were this big, well, if I had chest muscles which were this big and I did this, well, you'd see stuff happening. All right, yeah, birds can fly, but if you give me chest muscles out to here and I do that, you'd see some exciting things. So this thing doesn't have a keeled sternum. So it had chest muscles, but nowhere near, it would not be able to say take off from one flap. It would have to get a running start. I'm sure you've seen like Canada geese gradually trying to increase, their velocity, or maybe climb up a tree and jump out of a branch and then like flap on the way down. So this thing could fly, but nowhere near as well as the birds of today. So we'll be getting to that. It could grab things with its clawed grasping hands. Is that a wing? Yes, but it's still a hand, still a clawed grasping hand. Still has teeth in its jaws. It has a long reptilian tail. So the first birds are mixes of features which no other dinosaurs have, but that modern birds do, but that the dinosaurs had and modern birds don't. So they're a mix of features. The ones I gave you, I think they're good to start off with. I have a little video here that goes through the skull in great detail and talks about, the parts that this thing had and compare them to modern birds and compare them to the dinosaurs, etc. But to be honest, here you start like naming parts of skull bones, like the pterygoid bone, and like this is probably just a little bit too deep for us. So the first birds are with us now. So this is by the mid-Jurassic period, but they are not modern birds. Oh, and there's someone else who just joined us. Okay. So Archaeopteryx belongs to this group, and so do a few other birds, and we call them the most primitive birds, the Archaeornithes. And the way you can tell is that they've got this long reptilian tail still, because and so there's a couple of species that belong to this group. The first things that happen is that they reduce the tail. Now, once again, I'm sorry, I'm like jumping around. Let me just show you what I mean. So there's different ways that you can have a tail. Modern bird tails look like that because you've got a short tail bone and all of the feathers come out in a fan. But the older birds and the dinosaurs, they had a frond-shaped tail, which had a long series of bones here. Modern birds don't have that because they have what's called a pygostyle. A pygostyle is where the tip of the tail is made of a couple of fused bones and all the feathers attached to that. The first birds have a long tail like that, no pygostyle. And then pygostyles develop like this and ultimately go like that. So that's one of the first things that the group of birds leading to modern birds does, is it gets a pygostyle and reduces its tail. Now notice they still have clawed grasping fingers, they still have teeth, but now they're getting the modern avian features gradually, so they have a pygostyle. And so now we have members of this group, including Confuciornis, which I just have to give a shout out to Confuciornis, obviously. In the old days, and I'm old enough to remember teaching in the old days, bird fossils were so rare that if you had a bird fossil at your museum, you would highlight it. You're like, ooh, like this is such a great fossil. But there is an area in China where supposedly it seems that like trapped volcanic gases just kind of like burst all, like in a sudden, this huge release of toxic gas, and everything just died. All right, just because it just got smothered with this toxic gas and just died. And they have uncovered so many like pristine fossils, including so many dinosaurs that look like birds and so many of the early birds, that now they have so many Confuciornis fossils that they actually use it to decorate other exhibits. So, that's wonderful that bird fossils are now so common that you can use it like that. But here you can see they still have the clawed grasping hands and they still have the teeth. All right. So life goes on if you're a bird, right? But then there is the next big thing is to change the chest, the thorax. And so the next group of birds, you don't have to know it, but I'm just saying it's called ornithothoraces because it's the thorax which changes. One of the things that changes, let's do the big one. All right, you get a keeled sternum. All right, so once again, you've got a sternum, but it's this flat thing. So your chest muscles go there, And you've got chest muscles, I'm not knocking your chest muscles. But birds, their chest muscles are so much bigger. And the reason is, somewhere I should, yeah. Look at that. You have a flat sternum. Look at that thing. So that's a huge bone sticking out. That's a huge place for flight muscles. So this did not exist in the earliest birds, but by the time you get to the group called the Ornithothoraces, this is tens of millions of years later, we're in the Cretaceous period by now, you get a keeled sternum, so bigger flight muscles. That's awesome. If you look here, the ribs are now different where they're reinforced a little bit. So if you're going to fly and you've got like this light skeleton, it's pretty delicate. I mean, bird bones are really thin and brittle. And so the stresses of flight could be really dangerous. But now you've got all of these reinforcements here. Heck, not only do you have ribs going down, these are ribs going down, you got ribs going up from the sternum that touch. So you got ribs going down and different ribs going up. All right, so you got a much stronger a sternum. And getting back to this thing. Here's a trick. Now, I'm going to be saying a couple of things and just repeating the same thing over and over. So if it doesn't come through the first time. What you want, and so I'm going to just say a whole bunch of things that come to the same point. You want the center of gravity for a bird to be there. You want it to be under the wings, all right? You want a center of gravity there. And if you want to raise your wings, since muscles only pull, that would kind of mean that the pulling up muscles would have to be on the back. How can you pull your arms back if you're a bird if you don't have muscles on your back which do that? Well, see, there's the trick. Look at this muscle. It's under the wing, but its tendon goes through the hole. It goes up and over the wing. So birds raise their wings, pulling on it from the back by a muscle that's actually underneath because its tendon goes up and goes through that hole. The earliest birds didn't have that. The later birds, this Ornithothoraces group does. So that and a few other things. Now you got birds which are actually good flyers. All right, remember, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I should stick to the state center of gravity. So they're good flyers. Also, just a couple of other things. Teeth. Birds have teeth. In fact, even chickens still have genes for teeth. You can get mutant chickens, which actually still have teeth. So in the genetic program of birds, there's still the instructions to have teeth. The first birds had them. But at a certain point, you realized, wait a minute. If I got this long neck with these heavy teeth are pretty heavy, that's going to throw off my center of gravity. Why don't I lose the teeth and then get a gizzard? And the gizzard is going to do the grinding, all right, the way the teeth would. But now look where the gizzard is. It's at the center of gravity. It's not way over here, which is now when I fly, I have to kind of overcome all of the weight that's over there. So we got the smaller tail. All right, we got, we're losing the heavy teeth there. We're modifying the muscles so we don't have big muscles on the back. All of these things are then changing the center of gravity of birds, and now they're getting better flyers. Now, once again, this is the really quick version, and if anyone's interested, I think there's a great story. I've got more videos, as you might get. If those are the first birds from the mid-Jurassic, some of them lose that long tail and develop a pygostyle. All right, so we call that group Pygostylia from this group on. All right, we then can view shortnesses in there. We get the thorax ones, the ones who modify their chest with the keel, all the things I just mentioned. See all these text things? These are things that the pink birds have that the green and the yellow ones didn't. So bird anatomy is being built over tens of millions of years in gradual steps. So here's, by the time we get to this node in the family tree, we get a few more things. So now birds are good at flying. All right. And something interesting happens. Now, we've done this with humans as well. We kind of assume that like, hey, I'm kind of like, a cool human. And you assume then that the human ancestors wanted to get to me. that the goal in evolution was to be like, all right, let's get one step closer to you, then one step closer, and then it would be a tree that leads to me. That's what we thought. When we now know study human fossils, we say we don't see a tree, we see a bush. There are branches going everywhere. Most of them died out, and then just sure, one led to me, but it wasn't as if everyone was thinking that's the one and only place to go. All right, let's go to Walt. All right, they weren't thinking that. There was a bush. And same thing here. There is a branch of birds that will lead to the birds alive today, going this way. But then we have this guy. These are the opposite birds, or the enantiornithine birds. Now, it's weird. Why do we call them opposite birds? It's because the way that their leg bones were fusing is the opposite direction as the modern birds. You don't care, all right? Just they're birds, but they're not the ancestors of the birds alive today. They're a side group. It was a bush with two big branches. This is the branch that's alive today. This is the branch which will die out when the dinosaurs die out. However, these guys are the winners in the Cretaceous. They're the most common birds. They're the most widespread birds. They're the most diverse birds. Some are sparrow-sized, some are vulture-sized. They were the first to lose their teeth. They are on all continents other than Antarctica. Some were flightless. Anyway, if you were to go to the Cretaceous and say which of these two branches of the bird's family tree is going to win the race and be the ones, that is successful in the future, you would have picked this group. But a big rock falls out of the sky 65 million years ago at the same time when volcanic eruptions, especially in India, were poisoning the world. And 60% of life dies out, including these guys. They were doing great. They were the world's most common birds, but now they're gone. And it was their minor cousins, the small branch that you didn't really think was going to go anywhere. They're the ones whose ancestors survive. All right. Now, we do have fossils of those. All right, so there's a couple of them. So I'll give you here. I've got a couple of pictures I'll call up here in a second. All right. So here's a sparrow-like. Come on, catch up. I'm sorry, my computer is not catching up. It will catch up, we swear. You'll see a bunch of these things which are, oh, come on. Oh, there we go. So there were a lot of diving birds that still had teeth, but these are not opposite birds. These are on our side of the family tree, or by ours, I mean the birds alive today. So there were toothed diving birds. All right, you can go to like the Museum of Natural History and see Bapdornis there. That's one of these. There's a gull-like bird, Ichthyornis. So we do have fossils of these. Now, when did teeth get lost? Well, a little after this point. They still had teeth, and modern chickens still have genes for teeth. So, teeth get lost along the way. When did they lose claws? Well, that's interesting. So I don't know if you know this one. Anyone know this bird? It's called a southern screamer. If you speak Spanish, it's a chaha. Look at those. It has claws. There are birds today which have claws. A lot of them, not too many, but some of them are only present in nestlings that they use to, climb on the nest. Some things like actually great blue herons and emus, they have tiny, tiny claws, but you wouldn't see it unless you had a dead one because the feathers cover it. But here's a bird that has, that's what it looks like in life. And you can kind of even see like a little, claw sticking up there. So claws get lost gradually over time. And so, once again, the point getting to birds were built slowly over time. Now, let's start talking about modern birds. How did they come about? Well, we don't have perfect fossil records of everywhere like the Amazon, etc. And bird skeletons are really light and hollow bones, so we don't have great things of that. So if you were to say, all right, let's take, if this is the family tree of birds, which I'm going to spend a lot of time on, so if you feel I'm rushing it, it's okay. We'll get back there. If this is the family tree of birds, where's the first branch? Well, the first branch are what we call the old mouth birds, the Paleognathus birds. And that's just because if you wanted to really know, and we painted all of the bones of the lower of the jaws, different colors, you could say, ooh, some of the birds like Urea, they have bony connections that remind us more of reptiles than of all of the other birds. So if you were to say, who are the most primitive birds alive today, it would be the ostrich, that they're in Africa. It would be the cassowary and the emu from Australia, the rhea from South America, and then also a couple of birds that fly from South America. I have them somewhere. So while most of the things I've just named are flightless, all right, we have the birds called tinamous. They can actually fly weakly from South America. So those are the old mouth birds, and they are the most primitive birds alive today. So if you take the birds alive today and look at the family tree, and when it branched, their branch is the deepest. All right. So there's that. Now, we're obviously, starting to wind up. I don't have a whole lot of time. One of the things we could talk about if we had more time is when the dinosaurs die, the planet lost all of its big herbivores and all of its big carnivores. Who would take its place? Well, obviously, mammals eventually will give us dogs and bears and cats and deer and goats and cows and elephants, etc. But mammals take a while to get their house in order. So for a long time, it's birds. So when humans got to Madagascar, they still found elephant birds that could get to be 500 pounds. When humans get to New Zealand, they find moas, which are birds who can get to be at least 12 feet tall, maybe 16 feet tall. But there were other groups of giant birds from South America, the thoracod's, which could get to be 9 feet tall, etc. So birds, once the dinosaurs die, they develop into all kinds of forms, including giant forms for a while. Now, this is where it kind of gets tough, because if this is the line where the dinosaurs die, here, that's the line. How much branching of the bird family tree happens before that? Well, we're pretty certain that the old mouth birds, like the rhea, the ostrich, etc., that their branch broke from the rest of them before the dinosaurs died. All right, so these lineages, they predate the death of the dinosaurs. All right, what's the next branch, and when did they come from? Well, if any of you are old, and because I'm old, you'll remember that, like, when you opened your bird, Peterson's guide in the old days, loons were the first thing you would see. Loons are the most primitive birds. Not anymore. All right. That's because we used to just classify things based on their anatomy. We now can do it in basis of their genes as well. And the order has changed. So if you follow this taxonomy of birds, every now and then you'll say, oh, and once again, I'll get to this in a second, what's a raptor? That's not an easy question to answer. It used to be, all the birds of prey, they're all related, right? The falcons and the hawks and the owls. And now it's like, no, falcons are not at all related to the other ones, and owls aren't either. So this is confusing now, because we're using gene sequences to classify birds. But if we do that, the next branch of birds are gallo-anseriforms, which is the fowl. All right, so that would be like turkeys, pheasants, chickens, guans. All right, and then the ducks and geese and swans. So that's the next most primitive group. And we think, but we're not positive, we think that they also broke from the rest of it before the dinosaurs died. And that so maybe some of this branching occurred before the dinosaurs died. So when the dinosaurs die, the lineages, which would lead to the birds alive today, had already broken into a couple of things surviving, like the old Paleognathus, the ancestors of the chicken group, the ancestors of the duck groups. And I have more on each of the orders here. Then what? All right. Well, I'm sorry. Here's where I'm starting to, as we start to get to the end. Well, then what? Well, once again, we are still kind of figuring out who's related with who. So if the old mouth birds come next, and then the fowl, the chicken fowl and the waterfowl, That branch occurred before the dinosaurs died. Now we're kind of looking at the age of mammals, where we're starting to get a whole lot of these next lineages, and where they fit is still being jumped around. So, like, if you read old bird classification guides, you might find that, does anyone remember when swifts were classified with swallows? And now we say, oh, wait, swifts aren't songbirds. Swifts are over here in this group. So some of this is still, as the evidence comes in. Uh, so we get these groups of birds here, and then there will be what we call the raptors. Now, this has been back and forth in debate. Eagles and hawks are closely related, although some eagles are more closely related to these hawks, while other eagles are related to those hawks. So eagles are not a biological group. All right. Vultures, are they related to hawks and eagles? Like, does this branch touch at the bottom, or are they just cousins? We could go back and forth on that. Owls, they're kind of related, but not, as closely. So raptors were once thought to be like this really good cohesive group. Now we're not quite so sure. And when I said vultures, please let me be clear. I'm sorry. The vultures in the New World are not closely related to hawks and eagles, but the vultures from the Old World are. So the Old World vultures are their closer cousins. New World vultures are not. Falcons anymore are way over here. All right. So woodpeckers are more closely related to eagles than falcons are. So by putting them together in a raptor group, kind of tough. Okay. So this is all occurring in the last 60 million years. But the very last kind of group to mention, notice who I haven't mentioned yet, the songbirds. Songbird, like when we think of birds, more than half of bird species today, they're small. They're really good at perching. They very often have beautiful melodious voices because of the syrinx at the base of their trachea. Songbirds, isn't that normal? No, that's the last group of birds to evolve. Little birds that are good at perching and are really good at singing. All right. Not only did the dinosaurs never know those, right? Most of the age of mammals doesn't know them either. So notice all of these branches occur. It's only up here at the top that the songbirds occur. But being a songbird is great. All right, there's lots of niches for eating bugs and et cetera. So if you were to now look at all of the families of birds, oh, you got the blackbirds, you got the sparrows, you got the warblers, you got these guys, you got that guys. So more than half of modern species of birds are songbirds. And then once again, we're still kind of comparing all of their genes to figure out, just look at all the branches of the birds' families here, which of the ones are most closely related to the others. Now, I don't want to get into this because I'll just make some of you mad. So, for example, do you like scarlet tanagers? Do you like tanagers? Yes, you're good. No, you're not good on scarlet. That's not a tanager. We call them scarlet tanagers, but actually they're cardinals. All right. So it turns out that some of the things we call cardinals are actually tanagers, and some of the things we call tanagers are actually cardinals. And remember Darwin's finches on the Galapagos? They're not finches. They're also tanagers. So as we start doing better comparison of the groups, who we put in which groups is going to change a little bit. Nothing would make me happier than to say that's all I want to say about birds. That's all that's important. We can wrap this up. Unfortunately, if we were to talk about the history of birds, tragically, there is one last thing that needs to get mentioned. I'll play this in the background. Here's a song. There have been mass extinctions in the history of Earth. A couple of them have helped give rise to the birds we have today. Unfortunately, we're living through one of them. All right. Now, mass extinctions don't have to occur like in the blink of an eye. This one has been going on since like the Ice Age. But birds are in trouble. North America has lost a quarter of its birds since 1950. All right. Now that's about the time when I was born. I was born in 1966. I'm not that old. I mean, I'm old, but I've been talking about the Jurassic period and like hundreds of millions of years. Having almost 60 years is not old. But if a continent of North America could lose a quarter of its birds, 3 billion in essentially my lifetime. That's a problem. All right. And so that's why groups like Audubon, like I don't know, I'm sure you guys did or if you did a Christmas bird count, we're trying to monitor this. How are birds doing? What changes are we seeing? This year was just a couple days ago ranked as the hottest year since records have been taken. Last year was the hottest year before this year. What is that going to do with birds? We don't know yet. So we need Audubon societies. We need people who care, who put up bird feeders, who help maintain and preserve habitats, who vote for legislation to preserve these. Because I wish it weren't true. We are still living through significant events in bird history. But the problem is it's not significant in a good way. It's birds are facing all of these challenges from climate changes, changes in precipitation. They're losing habitat because the ever-increasing human population needs it. There's more and more plastics in the environment. There's more and more lead. There's more and more heavy metals in the environment. There's more invasive species. There's more, all of these can be, pests. They can be predators. And so if ever, birds needed advocates to enjoy them, to value them, and to help preserve them, it's now. And so, your organization and the reason that you're here in this talk is because you get that. And so, I want to thank you for that. And, hopefully together we can help make a difference for this wonderful, wonderful group. And just the point of this talk is when we look at the amazing adaptations that these birds have, we now realize, well, these have been, well over 150 million years in the making. It has been a long chain of very, very gradual changes which have gotten us to the great biodiversity of birds which we have today. Once again, I have so many other videos and so many other topics, and if anyone is interested, once again, my YouTube channel is Dr. Jahn 41. So if you went to my channel and you went all the way down to wildlife of the Northeast, you would see a whole lot of videos on different kinds of birds. But I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. So I don't know if Leslie, if you had any things you'd like to say, or if anyone had any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you for that absolutely fascinating presentation. I'm floored by the wealth of specific information. It's incredible. And the mechanics, the tendon that goes through the holes, the center of gravity. I love that. Microraptor. I'm nominating
Yes.
Microraptor as the best supporting actor. But
Oh, okay. So I am shameless in many ways. But because you did that, if you don't mind, just so you hear a little bit, you can hear a tiny bit of the Microraptor song.
sure. Ah, I'm not hearing it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Why did you become so small?
Okay. So I have I
I
have
heard
had that
it.
trouble in the past where sometimes I can hear things that you can't. But
No,
if
I
anyone
heard a
says,
tiny bit. That's cute.
if anyone thinks I must hear the Microraptor song or we have those things too.
And that heartbreaking but necessary message at the end about loss of birds. You're preaching to the flock here, but the more we hear it, the more we'll be inspired to spread the word and do more ourselves. So thank you for that. I do have a question, but let's open the floor. If anyone has comments, questions, I don't see. I'm looking at the chat. I don't see specific questions in the chat. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves and please ask away.
I just stopped sharing. I could share again.
Sure. Well, I don't hear anyone. If anyone's speaking, please unmute. I will ask my question, and if this was sort of covered already, apologies. I'm not even sure how to phrase this, but why did creatures evolve to strive toward flight? Was it do you think it just became obvious that there was another dimension that would confer advantages on the dinosaurs to make them gradually evolve toward being aerodynamic, or the why of it? Do we know anything? Like, I know in plants, some plants are said to have evolved feathery leaves because they become more flexible and less prone to damage by the wind, for instance. Was it that sort of thing that made these?
Well, Virginia made a great comment that I'd like to piggyback on. She asked, are the pterodactyls like pteranodon? Are they birds? Um, so birds are great flyers, but they were actually third. I mean, the bugs did it first. The pterodactyls did it second. Birds did it third, if you don't count like a lineage of dinosaurs here and there, like Microraptor or Rahona. And then bats will do it fourth. So a couple of groups have said, ooh, this flying thing must be great. If I were to give my hunches, first off, I would say for 100 million years, once a bug started to fly away, it was on base. You couldn't get a flying bug. I mean, like if you ate bugs, once it started to fly, it got away. All right. So there's lots of bugs in the world. So being able to fly after those, that's clearly an advantage. There's lots of fish in the world, but you have to stand on the shore and wait for them to come to you, unless you can fly over, and then like, oh, here's a dead fish, here's a living fish, grab those. So even if you're flying poorly, all of it, bugs and fish, and the world has lots of those. Now you can eat those. Even plants. I mean, you've got all these flowering trees which have seeds up in the branches, but how are you going to climb up there? But like, if you can fly, ooh, look at all the food that's up there. So I think that would be a primary thing. But then also there's, hey, I can avoid predators. Hey, I can migrate. So like I can't live in this area all year round. It gets, a little too cold for me, but if I only go there when it's warm and then I move away. So I think, there was just all of these great reasons to try to develop that.
You finished. Any questions?
Someone's just waiting.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah, did anyone else have a question? And so the question, Virginia, the pterodactyls, they were not birds. They were reptiles, kind of closely related to the dinosaurs. Like they do share features. So the first dinosaurs and the first flying pterosaurs appear about the same time in the Triassic period, by the middle, whereas the first birds don't appear until the middle of the next period, the Jurassic period.
Thank you for your answers. Yeah, numerous obvious advantages of flight. And it sounds like in teeny tiny increments, creatures discovered how to make it work mechanically.
No.
Absolutely fascinating. And if we're interested in the longer version of all of this, we go to your channel and scroll down, and I just wanted to say that the videos and diagrams were so colorful and wonderful, bringing this subject to life. Wonderful presentation. I'm sure we all appreciate it and learned so much. Thanks
Thank
again.
you. It was, I'm going to run back to my little Audubon group, and I'm sorry that I don't live near you. But I wish you all of the best in your bird hikes and in your birding. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you so much. And just another reminder about our seed sale going on right now. And please tune in for our speaker programs the next couple of months. We have speakers on the Bronx River. We have Julie Zickafoos on baby birds. If you enjoyed this program, please spread the word, and hope to see some of you on our trip to the Shawangunk grasslands on the 27th. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.